Justice is not a universal constant, but a reflection of the civilizations that define it. Across the worlds of Azeroth, from the gleaming spires of Stormwind to the shadow-wrapped depths of the Undercity, crime and punishment take forms shaped by culture, history, and the fundamental beliefs about what separates civilization from chaos. Every stolen coin, every act of sedition, every moment of desperation becomes a test of these systems, revealing not just how societies punish wrongdoing, but how they understand the very nature of moral order itself. The morning mist clings to the canals of Stormwind City with the persistence of unwelcome truth, carrying the scent of harbor salt and the distant smoke of forges that never rest. In the merchant quarter, where cobblestones worn smooth by countless footsteps reflect the early light like scattered coins, a young woman named Lyra Thornfield extends her hand toward a baker's cart. The bread is fresh from the ovens, marked with the lion seal of Stormwind, and priced at 3 silver pieces, more than a dock worker earns in a week. Lyra's fingers close around the warm loaf. In that moment, she becomes more than a hungry citizen of the Alliance. She becomes a problem that requires resolution. The City Watch Patrol that witnesses the theft responds with the measured efficiency that characterizes all aspects of Stormwind's civil administration. These are not the battle-hardened soldiers who march beneath Alliance banners against the Horde, but men and women trained specifically for the complexities of urban law enforcement. Their authority derives not from martial prowess, but from an intricate legal framework that has evolved through generations of human civilization, rebuilding itself from the ashes of wars both internal and external. What follows Lyra's act of desperation reveals the sophisticated machinery of justice that Stormwind has constructed to maintain order among populations that remember the chaos of the First and Second Wars. The kingdom understands that stability requires more than military strength. It demands systematic responses to crime that balance deterrence with the practical needs of a society constantly rebuilding itself. Every theft, every act of violence, every moment of civil disobedience becomes an opportunity to demonstrate that law, not strength alone, defines the difference between civilization and barbarism. The guardsman who first approaches Lyra does so with words rather than weapons, though his hand rests casually on the pommel of his sword. Stormwind's approach to civilian law enforcement emphasizes de-escalation and investigation over immediate force, reflecting a legal philosophy that distinguishes between threats to public order and symptoms of deeper social problems. Lyra is not immediately beaten or restrained. Instead, she is questioned about her circumstances, her reasons for the theft, and her ability to make restitution. This initial interaction serves multiple purposes beyond mere fact-gathering. It establishes the authority of the City Watch, demonstrates the possibility of reasonable resolution, and most importantly, begins the psychological process that will either integrate the offender back into society or justify more severe interventions. Lyra's response to this initial questioning determines the trajectory of her journey through Stormwind's justice system. Her explanation that she has been unemployed since the textile mills reduced their workforce following increased trade competition from Ironforge reveals information that will influence every subsequent decision about her case. Stormwind's legal framework recognizes distinctions between crimes of desperation, crimes of opportunity, and crimes of malice, with different procedural responses appropriate to each category. Her theft, motivated by hunger rather than greed, places her within a classification system that emphasizes rehabilitation over punishment, though the machinery of law enforcement will still process her with mechanical precision. The administrative procedures that follow Lyra's arrest demonstrate Stormwind's commitment to legal consistency across all levels of society. Her personal information is recorded in ledgers that connect to broader databases tracking employment, residence, and criminal history throughout the kingdom. These records serve not just to identify repeat offenders, but to identify social patterns that might indicate broader problems requiring policy intervention. Her unemployment becomes a data point in economic assessments that influence everything from trade policy to public works programs. Her residential address in the Harbour District links her case to ongoing concerns about poverty and crime in areas affected by economic disruption. The escort to the Stormwind Keep for formal processing provides Lyra with a comprehensive view of the kingdom's approach to criminal justice architecture. The route passes through districts where different social classes conduct their daily business, demonstrating the integration of law enforcement into the broader civic structure. Citizens observe the procession with the careful attention of those who understand that today's criminal might be tomorrow's victim, and that the treatment of both reflects the stability of the society they all depend upon. The guards maintain professional demeanor throughout the journey, neither apologetic nor aggressive, embodying the principle that law enforcement serves the community rather than expressing personal authority. The Stormwind Keep's judicial wing represents the kingdom's most sophisticated achievement in legal administration. Built during the Reconstruction following the Second War, it incorporates architectural principles designed to inspire respect for law, while maintaining accessibility to all citizens regardless of social status. The chambers where Lyra will await trial are neither luxurious nor deliberately harsh, reflecting a philosophical commitment to processing crime without prejudging guilt or innocence. Her temporary detention serves practical purposes of investigation and evaluation rather than punitive ones, though the psychological impact of separation from normal life begins immediately upon her arrival. The investigation that follows Lyra's arrest reveals the systematic thoroughness with which Stormwind approaches even minor crimes. Guard investigators interview the baker whose bread was stolen, canvass the area for witnesses, and examine Lyra's employment and residential history. This process serves multiple functions beyond establishing the facts of the specific case. It gathers information about broader patterns of economic crime in the district, evaluates the effectiveness of current employment programs, and identifies other individuals who might be at risk for similar offenses. Every crime becomes a window into the social conditions that produce criminal behavior, allowing the kingdom to address problems systemically rather than merely punishing their symptoms. Lyra's legal representation comes through Stormwind's commitment to ensuring that all citizens, regardless of economic status, receive competent advocacy during legal proceedings. The public defender assigned to her case is not a charity volunteer, but a professionally trained advocate whose compensation and career advancement depend upon successful representation of clients across all social classes. This system recognizes that effective legal defense serves the interests of society as a whole by ensuring that convictions result from genuine guilt rather than inadequate representation. Her defender's investigation of her case will be as thorough as the prosecution's, creating an adversarial process designed to reveal truth through systematic examination of evidence and argument. The judicial proceedings that determine Lyra's fate operate according to principles that balance individual rights against community needs, evolved through generations of human legal tradition and adapted to the specific requirements of a society rebuilding itself from repeated catastrophes. The judge who presides over her case has been selected through a process that emphasizes both legal expertise and community accountability, serving terms long enough to develop consistent jurisprudence, but short enough to remain responsive to changing social conditions. Her courtroom reflects architectural principles designed to emphasize the dignity of legal proceedings while maintaining accessibility to ordinary citizens who might serve as witnesses, jurors, or observers. The presentation of evidence in Lyra's case demonstrates Stormwind's commitment to factual accuracy in legal decision-making. Witnesses testify under oath, with perjury carrying penalties severe enough to encourage truthfulness. Physical evidence is examined by specialists whose training in investigative techniques rivals that of military intelligence officers, though their methods are adapted to civilian rather than battlefield conditions. Most importantly, the proceedings are conducted in public, allowing community members to observe the process by which their society makes decisions about crime and punishment. This transparency serves both to ensure accountability and to educate citizens about the legal standards that govern their community. The legal arguments presented during Lyra's trial reveal the sophisticated framework of precedent and principle that guides Stormwind's approach to criminal justice. Her defense attorney argues that her crime was motivated by economic necessity rather than criminal intent, citing previous cases where courts have recognized distinctions between different categories of theft. The prosecution maintains that regardless of motivation, theft undermines the economic relationships that allow society to function, and that consistent enforcement of property law is essential to maintaining public order. Both arguments reflect deeper philosophical questions about the relationship between individual need and social responsibility that have shaped human legal thinking for centuries. The jury selection process for Lyra's trial demonstrates Stormwind's commitment to community participation in legal decision-making while ensuring that verdicts reflect careful consideration of evidence rather than popular prejudice. Potential jurors are questioned about their backgrounds, their attitudes toward crime and punishment, and their ability to evaluate evidence objectively. The composition of the final jury represents a cross-section of Stormwind society, including merchants who understand the economic impact of theft, laborers who understand economic hardship, and citizens from various districts who bring different perspectives to the evaluation of her case. The verdict in Lyra's case reflects the careful weighing of competing principles that characterizes Stormwind's approach to criminal justice. She is found guilty of theft, but the jury recommends mercy based on her circumstances and lack of prior criminal history. This recommendation allows the judge to craft a sentence that serves multiple objectives simultaneously, punishing the crime to maintain deterrent effect, addressing the social conditions that contributed to the offense, and providing opportunities for the offender to demonstrate rehabilitation. Her sentence combines restitution to the victim, community service that addresses broader social needs, and participation in employment programs designed to prevent future offenses. The implementation of Lyra's sentence reveals the practical machinery through which Stormwind transforms legal decisions into social outcomes. Her restitution payment is structured to acknowledge her limited financial resources, while ensuring that the baker receives compensation for his loss. Her community service assignment involves work on public projects that provide both punishment through required labor and benefit to society through useful work. Most importantly, her participation in employment programs connects her case to broader economic policies designed to address the structural problems that contribute to property crime. The Stormwind Stockades, where more serious offenders serve their sentences, represents the kingdom's approach to criminals who require separation from society for extended periods. Built into the foundations beneath the city, the prison combines security with conditions designed to maintain the human dignity of inmates while preventing escape or violence. The facility operates according to principles that distinguish between punishment and cruelty, providing adequate food, shelter, and medical care while restricting freedom and requiring productive labor. Inmates participate in programs designed to develop skills and attitudes that will support successful reintegration into society upon release. The daily routine within the stockades reflects Stormwind's understanding that effective imprisonment requires structured activity that serves both security and rehabilitation purposes. Prisoners wake at scheduled times, participate in mandatory labor, that contributes to the kingdom's economic needs, and attend educational programs that address both practical skills and moral reasoning. Religious services provide spiritual guidance for those who seek it, while secular counseling addresses the psychological factors that contribute to criminal behavior. The overall structure creates an environment where compliance with prison rules provides tangible benefits, while violation results in measurable consequences. The governance structure within the stockades demonstrates Stormwind's commitment to maintaining legal principles even within prison environments. Prisoner complaints about conditions or treatment are investigated through formal procedures that include review by external authorities. Guards receive training in conflict resolution and de-escalation techniques, with disciplinary actions against prisoners required to follow documented procedures that can be reviewed by higher authorities. This systematic approach to prison administration reflects the understanding that how society treats its criminals reveals fundamental truths about its commitment to justice and human dignity. The rehabilitation programs offered within the stockades address different aspects of criminal behavior through evidence-based interventions developed over generations of experience with crime and punishment. Literacy programs ensure that inmates can function effectively in society upon release. Trade training provides marketable skills that offer alternatives to criminal activity. Counseling programs address addiction, anger management, and other personal issues that contribute to criminal behavior. Most importantly, these programs operate on voluntary participation principles, recognizing that genuine rehabilitation requires internal motivation rather than external coercion. The release procedures for inmates completing their sentences in the stockades demonstrate Stormwind's recognition that successful reintegration into society requires systematic support during the transition period. Former inmates receive assistance with housing, employment, and social services designed to address the practical challenges of rebuilding legitimate lives. Parole supervision provides both monitoring and support, helping former criminals navigate the challenges of freedom while ensuring that they comply with the conditions of their release. This comprehensive approach to prisoner reintegration reflects understanding that crime often results from social problems that require ongoing attention rather than simple punishment. The broader implications of Stormwind's criminal justice system extend beyond individual cases to encompass fundamental questions about the relationship between law and society in a world constantly threatened by external conflicts and internal tensions. The kingdom's approach to crime reflects its commitment to maintaining civilization through legal institutions rather than military force alone. Every theft prosecuted, every sentence served, every successful rehabilitation demonstrates that human society can maintain order through rational systems that balance individual rights against collective needs. In a world where chaos constantly threatens to overwhelm civilization, the consistent application of just laws represents one of humanity's most important achievements in the ongoing struggle to create meaning from possibility. The red dust of Durotar swirls beneath the morning sun with the restless energy of a land that remembers conquest, carrying the scent of dry earth and the distant smoke of cooking fires that mark the boundaries between civilization and the wild. In the Valley of Honor, where the great forges of Orgrimmar echo with the rhythm of weapons being born, a young orc warrior named Groktar Bloodfist turns his back on the battle line during a training exercise against centaur raiders. The moment his boots carry him away from his brothers in arms, he becomes more than a coward. He becomes a stain upon the honor that binds Orcish society together, a problem that cannot be ignored or forgotten, only resolved through blood or redemption. The concept of honor among the Orcish people transcends mere social convention to become the fundamental organizing principle around which all aspects of life, law, and justice revolve. It is not simply a code of conduct, but a spiritual framework that determines an individual's place within the clan. their relationship with their ancestors, and their worthiness to stand among the living. Honor can be earned through courage in battle, loyalty to clan and war chief, and adherence to the ancient traditions that survived the corruption of demon blood and the exodus from Draenor. It can also be lost through cowardice, betrayal, theft, or any action that places individual interest above the welfare of the clan. Once lost, honor becomes a debt that must be repaid through suffering, service, or death. Groktar's act of cowardice during the training exercise sets in motion a cascade of events that will test not only his own character, but the effectiveness of Orcish justice in maintaining social order among a people whose history is written in blood and whose future depends upon their ability to stand united against a hostile world. His fellow warriors witness his desertion with the stunned disbelief of those who have built their entire identity around the assumption that orcs do not abandon their brothers in battle. Their immediate response reveals the deep cultural conditioning that makes Orcish society function despite its constant proximity to violence and death. They do not pursue him to drag him back to the fight. They do not immediately report his cowardice to their superiors. Instead, they continue the battle with grim efficiency, each warrior fighting with doubled intensity to compensate for the missing member of their unit. The aftermath of the training exercise provides the first indication of how Orcish justice will process Groktar's transgression. His company commander, a scarred veteran named Ugrok Ironjaw, who bears the marks of battles fought from the eastern kingdoms to the wastes of Silithus, does not immediately summon Groktar for punishment or public humiliation. Instead, he convenes a gathering of the warriors who witnessed the desertion, conducting what amounts to an informal trial that will determine whether the matter requires formal adjudication by clan leadership or can be resolved through internal discipline. This initial process reflects the Orcish understanding that honor is not simply an individual possession, but a collective resource that affects the entire community. The warriors who testify about Groktar's desertion speak with the careful precision of those who understand that their words will determine not only his fate, but the integrity of their own honor. Each recounts exactly what he observed, without embellishment or interpretation, allowing the facts to speak for themselves. Their testimony reveals not just the sequence of events, but the cultural context that makes those events significant. Groktar did not simply leave the battlefield. He abandoned his position at a moment when his brothers depended upon his strength, violating the fundamental trust that allows Orcish warriors to function as a unified force. His desertion forced others to take additional risks to compensate for his absence, endangering lives and compromising the effectiveness of their unit. Ugrok's evaluation of the testimony follows procedures that have been refined through generations of Orcish military tradition, dating back to the original clans on Draenor and adapted to the realities of life in the hostile environment of Kalimdor. He considers not only the facts of Groktar's desertion, but the circumstances that might have contributed to it, the impact on unit cohesion, and the broader implications for maintaining discipline within the Horde's military structure. His decision that the matter requires formal adjudication reflects the seriousness with which Orcish society treats violations of military honor, recognizing that even minor breaches of discipline can cascade into larger problems if not addressed systematically. The summons that brings Groktar before the clan tribunal arrives through channels that demonstrate the integration of military and civilian authority within Orcish society. A wolf rider appears at his family's dwelling in the Valley of Spirits, bearing a message written in the traditional Orcish script that has been adapted from the original clan languages of Draenor. The message does not threaten or condemn, but simply states that his presence is required for a matter involving his honor, providing him with the time and location for the formal hearing. This procedural restraint reflects the Orcish commitment to justice over vengeance, ensuring that accused individuals have the opportunity to prepare their defense and gather supporters who can speak to their character. Groktar's family receives the summons with the stoic acceptance that characterizes Orcish responses to honor crises. His father, a veteran of the campaigns against the Burning Legion, who bears scars from battles in both Azeroth and Outland, does not express shame or anger at his son's disgrace. Instead, he begins the practical preparations necessary to support Groktar through the judicial process, gathering evidence of his previous service, contacting warriors who have fought alongside him, and consulting with clan elders who can provide guidance about the appropriate responses to different possible outcomes. This family response demonstrates the collective nature of honor within Orcish culture, where individual actions affect entire kinship networks and where restoration requires community support. The tribunal that will judge Groktar's case convenes in the Hall of the Brave, a structure within Orgrimmar that combines the functions of courthouse, ceremonial center, and monument to Orcish military tradition. The architecture reflects the values that guide Orcish justice, with walls decorated by weapons captured in famous battles, banners representing the various clans that make up the Horde, and carved reliefs depicting legendary warriors whose examples define the standards of honor that all orcs are expected to meet. The space is designed to remind participants that they are part of a larger historical narrative that extends back to the original clans and forward to future generations who will judge their actions. The composition of Groktar's tribunal reflects the Orcish commitment to judging honor cases through representatives of the community most affected by the alleged transgression. The presiding judge is a clan elder whose own military service includes campaigns against both the Alliance and various threats to Horde territory, providing him with the experience necessary to understand the practical implications of military discipline. The other members include a representative from Groktar's own clan, who can speak to his family history and character, a warrior from his military unit who witnessed the alleged desertion, and a shaman whose spiritual authority provides guidance about the relationship between individual actions and community welfare. The presentation of evidence in Orcish tribunals follows procedures that emphasize direct testimony over written documentation, reflecting a cultural tradition that values personal witness over bureaucratic record-keeping. Ugrok Ironjaw testifies about the circumstances of the training exercise, the tactical situation that required Groktar's presence, and the impact of his desertion on unit effectiveness. His testimony is delivered without emotional embellishment, focusing on the practical consequences of Groktar's actions rather than moral condemnation. This restrained approach reflects the Orcish understanding that honor violations are serious enough to speak for themselves without rhetorical enhancement. Groktar's fellow warriors provide testimony that reveals the complex social dynamics surrounding his desertion. Some speak of his previous courage in battle, citing specific examples where he fought effectively alongside his brothers. Others describe his recent behavior, noting signs of anxiety or hesitation that might have indicated developing problems with combat effectiveness. Their testimony demonstrates the Orcish recognition that honor failures often result from underlying issues that affect the entire community, requiring responses that address causes rather than simply punishing symptoms. The defense that Groktar presents to the tribunal reveals both his understanding of Orcish honor concepts and his attempt to place his actions within a framework that might allow for restoration rather than permanent disgrace. He does not deny his desertion or attempt to minimize its significance. Instead, he explains the psychological factors that led to his failure, describing nightmares and anxiety that began following a previous battle where he witnessed the deaths of close friends. His testimony demonstrates courage in its willingness to expose personal weakness, but also reveals the depth of his honor debt by showing that his desertion was not momentary cowardice, but the result of sustained psychological deterioration. The spiritual testimony provided by the clan shaman adds a dimension to Groktar's trial that distinguishes Orcish justice from purely secular legal systems. The shaman speaks about the relationship between individual spiritual health and community welfare, explaining how Groktar's psychological distress affects not only his own capacity for honorable behavior, but the spiritual balance of his entire clan. This testimony is not used to excuse his desertion, but to provide context for understanding the appropriate response, emphasizing healing and restoration over simple punishment. The shaman's analysis connects Groktar's case to broader questions about how Orcish society supports warriors who suffer spiritual wounds from their service to the community. The deliberation process that follows the presentation of evidence demonstrates the Orcish commitment to consensus building in matters that affect community honor. The tribunal members discuss not only Groktar's guilt or innocence, but the appropriate response that will serve the needs of justice while maintaining the possibility of redemption. Their conversation ranges across precedents from clan history, the practical requirements of military discipline, and the spiritual principles that govern relationships between individuals and community. This comprehensive approach reflects the Orcish understanding that legal decisions must serve multiple purposes simultaneously, addressing the specific case while maintaining the broader cultural frameworks that define Orcish identity. The verdict delivered by Groktar's tribunal reflects the sophisticated balance between punishment and restoration that characterizes mature Orcish jurisprudence. He is found guilty of desertion, a finding that acknowledges the factual basis of the charges and maintains the principle that honor violations cannot be ignored or minimized. However, the tribunal also recognizes mitigating factors in his psychological condition and his previous record of honorable service, allowing for a sentence that emphasizes restoration over destruction. His punishment combines immediate consequences that acknowledge his disgrace with longer-term requirements that provide opportunities for redemption. The specific elements of Groktar's sentence demonstrate how Orcish justice addresses different aspects of honor violation through coordinated interventions. He is stripped of his rank and position within his military unit, acknowledging that his desertion has made him unfit for leadership responsibilities that require the absolute trust of subordinates. He is required to make restitution to the families of warriors who were endangered by his absence, recognizing the practical harm caused by his actions. Most significantly, he is offered the opportunity to restore his honor through ritualized combat that will test both his courage and his commitment to redeeming himself in the eyes of his community. The option of trial by combat, known in Orcish tradition as Mak Gora, represents one of the most distinctive features of Orcish justice, reflecting cultural values that emphasize individual agency and personal responsibility over collective punishment. Groktar can choose to accept his disgrace and live with diminished status within the clan, or he can risk his life in combat that will either restore his honor completely or result in honorable death that cleanses his shame. This choice recognizes that honor is ultimately a personal possession that cannot be restored by external authority, but must be reclaimed through individual action that demonstrates genuine transformation. The preparation period before Groktar's potential Mak Gora provides opportunities for community healing that extend beyond the immediate participants to encompass the broader social relationships affected by his honor violation. Members of his clan visit to offer support and guidance, sharing stories of their own struggles with honor and courage. Former enemies who have fought against him in the past arrive to acknowledge his previous bravery and express their willingness to accept his restoration if he demonstrates genuine courage. These interactions serve both to prepare him psychologically for the challenges ahead and to rebuild the social connections that his desertion had damaged. Groktar's decision to accept trial by combat rather than permanent disgrace reflects his understanding of Orcish cultural values and his commitment to addressing the psychological issues that led to his original failure. The weeks of preparation that follow his acceptance involve not only physical training to prepare for combat, but spiritual exercises designed to address the anxiety and trauma that contributed to his desertion. Clan shamans work with him to understand the spiritual dimensions of his psychological wounds, while veteran warriors share their own experiences with combat stress and the methods they have developed for maintaining courage in the face of repeated danger. The selection of Groktar's opponent for the Mak Gora follows traditional procedures that ensure the combat will provide a genuine test of his restored courage without being simply an execution disguised as justice. The opponent must be a warrior of comparable skill and experience, creating conditions where victory requires genuine courage and preparation rather than superior ability or lucky circumstance. The chosen opponent is Drakthor Skullcrusher, a veteran of numerous campaigns whose reputation for honorable combat makes him an ideal candidate to serve as the instrument of either Groktar's redemption or his honorable death. The formal rituals that precede the Mak Gora serve multiple functions beyond simple ceremony, creating psychological conditions that maximize the spiritual significance of the combat, while ensuring that the outcome reflects genuine character rather than chance factors. Both combatants undergo purification ceremonies that cleanse them of external influences and focus their attention on the spiritual dimensions of their contest. They participate in ancestral invocations that connect their individual struggle to the larger history of Orcish courage and honor. Most importantly, they engage in formal declarations that clarify the spiritual stakes of their combat and commit them to accepting whatever outcome the contest produces. The combat itself takes place in the Circle of Honor within Orgrimmar's ceremonial center, surrounded by representatives of the various clans who serve as witnesses to ensure that the contest meets traditional standards for legitimacy and fairness. The weapons available to both combatants are identical, eliminating advantages based on equipment or preparation. The rules governing the combat emphasize personal courage over tactical sophistication, preventing either participant from using strategies that might produce victory without demonstrating the spiritual qualities that the Mak Gora is designed to test. The entire structure of the contest is designed to create conditions where the outcome reflects the true character of the participants rather than external factors. Groktar's performance during the Mak Gora reveals the psychological transformation that his preparation period has produced, demonstrating not only renewed courage, but genuine understanding of the principles that make courage meaningful within Orcish culture. His fighting style shows none of the hesitation or anxiety that characterized his desertion, replaced by focused determination that acknowledges the possibility of death while refusing to be paralyzed by that awareness. His conduct toward his opponent demonstrates respect for the tradition they both serve and recognition that their combat serves purposes larger than individual survival or victory. The conclusion of Groktar's Mak Gora provides resolution not only for his individual case, but for the broader questions about honor, justice, and redemption that his desertion had raised within the community. His victory over Drakthor Skullcrusher, achieved through courage and skill rather than luck or deception, demonstrates that his psychological wounds have been genuinely healed and that his commitment to Orcish honor has been authentically restored. The formal recognition of his victory by clan elders and community witnesses completes the process of restoration, returning him to full membership in Orcish society, with his honor not only cleansed, but enhanced by his willingness to risk death for redemption. The aftermath of Groktar's successful Mak Gora demonstrates how individual cases of honor restoration contribute to the broader cultural frameworks that maintain Orcish social cohesion. His return to military service provides an example for other warriors who might struggle with psychological wounds from combat, showing that healing is possible and that temporary failures do not necessarily result in permanent disgrace. His experience becomes part of the oral tradition through which Orcish culture transmits lessons about courage, honor, and the possibilities for redemption that distinguish mature societies from primitive ones. The broader implications of Orcish justice, as revealed through Groktar's case, extend beyond individual criminal prosecution to encompass fundamental questions about how warrior societies maintain moral order without sacrificing the aggressive qualities that ensure their survival. The emphasis on honor over law, personal responsibility over institutional authority, and redemption over punishment reflects cultural adaptations to the realities of life in a hostile world where military effectiveness and social cohesion must be maintained simultaneously. Every desertion addressed, every honor restored, every Mak'gora completed, demonstrates that Orcish society has developed sophisticated methods for balancing individual agency against collective needs, while preserving the cultural identity that distinguishes the Horde from its enemies and allies alike. The ancient forests of Teldrassil whisper with the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years, their leaves carrying memories of cycles that span generations of mortal races, each rustling branch a testament to the eternal patience that governs all things within the realm of the Kaldori. In the shadow of the great world tree's massive trunk, where moonlight filters through canopies so vast they create their own weather, a night elf hunter named Cylindrus Nightbreeze raises her blade against the sacred grove of Elune, severing branches from trees that have grown undisturbed since the world was young. The moment her steel bites into bark blessed by the goddess herself, she becomes more than a criminal. She becomes a wound in the natural order, a discord that threatens the harmony between civilization and the wild that has sustained her people through ages of war and transformation. Night elf justice emerges not from written codes or royal decrees, but from the fundamental understanding that all life exists within interconnected webs of responsibility that extend through time, space, and spiritual dimensions beyond mortal comprehension. Every action creates ripples that affect not only the immediate community, but the balance between civilization and nature, the relationship between the material world and the emerald dream, and the cosmic harmony that connects all living things to the eternal cycles of growth, death, and renewal. Crime, in this context, becomes not merely violation of social rules, but disruption of spiritual equilibrium that threatens the foundations upon which Kaldore society has been built across millennia of existence. The detection of Cylindrus's transgression against the sacred grove occurs through mechanisms that predate organized law enforcement by thousands of years, drawing upon the mystical connections that bind druids to the natural world they serve. The trees themselves communicate their distress through networks of root and consciousness that span entire continents, carrying information about the violation to druids who maintain constant communion with the forest's spiritual essence. Ancient Trents, awakened by the disruption to their slumber, begin the process of investigation that will determine not only the identity of the transgressor, but the appropriate response that will restore the harmony her actions have disrupted. Kaldore understanding of criminal behavior reflects their unique perspective on time, consequence, and moral responsibility, shaped by lifespans that extend across centuries and memories that encompass the rise and fall of entire civilizations. Cylindrus's attack on the sacred grove cannot be understood as momentary lapse in judgment or desperate response to immediate circumstances, but must be evaluated within the context of her entire existence and its relationship to the broader patterns of choice and consequence that define individual character. Her crime represents not just present wrongdoing, but potential future disruption that could cascade through decades or centuries of continuing existence unless properly addressed through appropriate intervention. The investigation that follows Cylindrus's identification as the Grove's attacker demonstrates the sophisticated integration of natural magic and criminal justice that characterizes Kaldorei legal institutions. Druids capable of communicating with the damaged trees gather testimony about the exact nature of the attack, the tools used, and the apparent motivation behind the destruction. Priestesses of Elune examine the spiritual resonances left by the crime, reading patterns of intention and emotion that reveal psychological factors contributing to the transgression. Most importantly, seers trained in the interpretation of natural omens evaluate the broader implications of the crime for the community's relationship with the forces that govern life, death, and renewal. Cylindris's capture occurs through methods that emphasize harmony over violence, reflecting Kaldorei cultural values that seek to minimize additional disruption, even when addressing serious crimes against natural order. Druids capable of shape-shifting surround her dwelling in forms that blend seamlessly with the forest environment, creating conditions where escape becomes impossible without resort to violence that would only compound her original transgression. When they reveal themselves to demand her surrender, they do so through formal invocations that acknowledge her continued membership in Kaldorei society, while making clear that her actions require formal adjudication through established legal procedures. The initial processing of Cylindris's case reflects the dual nature of Kaldorei authority, combining secular governance with spiritual guidance in ways that ensure both immediate justice and long-term restoration of natural harmony. Civil authorities within Darnassus record the factual details of her case, documenting the extent of damage to the sacred grove and gathering evidence that will support formal charges against her. Simultaneously, druids and priestesses begin the spiritual assessments that will determine the metaphysical implications of her crime and the appropriate responses that will address not only her individual transgression, but its broader effects on community welfare and environmental balance. The detention facility where Cylindris awaits trial represents one of the most distinctive features of Kaldorei criminal justice, designed to maintain security while preserving the natural connections that define Night Elf existence. Her holding area is not a traditional cell, but a living space created within the branches of an ancient tree, whose consciousness has been awakened specifically to serve as both guardian and counselor for accused criminals. The tree provides security through its ability to monitor and control her movements, but also offers opportunities for spiritual reflection and communication with natural forces that might contribute to her eventual redemption or transformation. The legal proceedings that will determine Cylindris's fate convene in the Temple of the Moon, where the integration of secular and spiritual authority creates conditions for addressing both the practical and metaphysical dimensions of her crime. The chamber where her trial takes place has been shaped by centuries of legal proceedings into a space that facilitates communication between the material world and the spiritual forces that govern natural law. Moonlight streams through crystalline formations that focus Elune's power, creating conditions where truth cannot be hidden and where the spiritual implications of legal decisions become visible to all participants. The tribunal that judges Cylindris's case represents the fundamental institutions of Kaldorei society, combining practical governance with spiritual authority in ways that ensure decisions serve both immediate needs and eternal principles. The presiding judge is a keeper of the grove whose authority derives from millennia of service to the natural order and whose decisions are guided by direct communion with the forces that govern life and death. Additional members include a priestess of Elune, whose connection to the goddess provides insight into the spiritual dimensions of crime and punishment, and representatives from the various aspects of Kaldorei society affected by crimes against sacred places. The presentation of evidence in Kaldorei courts draws upon sources of information that extend far beyond mortal testimony, incorporating spiritual testimony from the natural forces directly affected by criminal behavior. The damaged trees provide their own account of Cylindris's attack, communicated through druids who serve as interpreters between plant consciousness and mortal understanding. The local wildlife offers testimony about disruption to their habitat and the broader ecological effects of the grove's desecration. Most significantly, seers trained in reading the patterns of the Emerald Dream present evidence about how her crime has affected the spiritual dimensions that parallel and interpenetrate the material world. Cylindris's defense before the Kaldorei tribunal reveals both her understanding of the spiritual framework that governs Night Elf justice and her attempt to place her actions within a context that might allow for restoration rather than permanent exile from Kaldorei society. She does not deny her attack on the sacred grove or attempt to minimize the spiritual significance of her transgression. Instead, she explains the psychological and spiritual crisis that led to her crime, describing visions and compulsions that began following exposure to corrupted magic during the recent conflicts that have scarred Azeroth. Her testimony demonstrates genuine remorse for her actions, while revealing the depth of corruption that will need to be addressed through appropriate spiritual intervention. The spiritual testimony provided by druids and priestesses adds dimensions to Cylindris's trial that distinguish Kaldorei justice from purely secular legal systems found among shorter-lived races. Expert witnesses describe the specific nature of the spiritual damage caused by her attack on the sacred grove, explaining how the disruption affects not only the immediate location, but the broader networks of natural magic that sustain Kaldorei civilization. This testimony is not used to increase her punishment, but to provide understanding of the appropriate responses that will restore both her individual spiritual health and the broader harmony that her actions have disrupted. The investigation into Cylindris's exposure to corrupted magic reveals connections between her individual crime and broader threats to Kaldorei society, demonstrating how criminal cases often serve as early warning indicators of problems that require systematic attention. Druids discover that her psychological corruption resulted from contact with Burning Legion artifacts that were inadequately contained following recent military campaigns, suggesting that her crime reflects institutional failures in managing magical contamination, rather than purely individual moral failure. This discovery transforms her case from simple criminal prosecution into a broader examination of how Kaldorei society protects itself against spiritual threats. The deliberation process that follows the presentation of evidence demonstrates the Kaldorei commitment to consensus building among the various spiritual and secular authorities that govern their society. Tribunal members engage in extended meditation and consultation with spiritual guides, seeking solutions that will address the immediate requirements of justice while maintaining harmony between all affected parties. Their discussions range across precedents from thousands of years of Kaldorei legal tradition, the practical requirements of maintaining social order, and the spiritual principles that govern relationships between individuals, community, and the natural world. The verdict delivered by Cylindris's tribunal reflects the sophisticated integration of punishment and healing that characterizes mature Kaldorei jurisprudence. She is found guilty of desecrating sacred space, a finding that acknowledges the seriousness of her transgression while recognizing the corrupted influence that contributed to her actions. Her sentence combines immediate consequences that address the harm she has caused with longer-term interventions designed to cleanse the spiritual corruption that led to her crime and restore her capacity for harmonious existence within Kaldorei society. The specific elements of Cylindris's sentence demonstrate how Kaldorei justice addresses different aspects of spiritual transgression through coordinated interventions that serve both punitive and healing functions. She is required to undergo purification, rituals designed to cleanse the demonic corruption from her spirit, recognizing that her crime resulted from external influence rather than inherent moral failure. She must participate in the restoration of the damaged grove, providing both restitution for her actions and opportunities for spiritual reconnection with the natural forces she violated. Most significantly, she is offered the choice between temporary exile to allow for complete spiritual healing or immediate transformation into animal form that will allow her to experience the natural world from the perspective of those she harmed. The option of willing transformation into animal form represents one of the most distinctive features of Kaldorei justice, reflecting cultural values that emphasize learning and growth over simple punishment. Selendris can choose to maintain her current form while undergoing extended purification and exile, or she can accept temporary transformation into a forest creature that will provide direct experience of the natural harmony she disrupted through her crime. This choice recognizes that genuine understanding often requires perspective that cannot be achieved through intellectual instruction alone, but must be gained through lived experience of different modes of existence. The preparation period before Selendris's potential transformation provides opportunities for community healing that extend beyond the immediate participants to encompass the broader spiritual relationships affected by her crime against sacred space. Members of the Druidic orders visit to offer guidance about the challenges and opportunities that transformation will provide, sharing their own experiences with shape-shifting and the insights it offers about the interconnection of all life. Priestesses of Elune conduct ceremonies designed to prepare her spirit for the radical change in perspective that animal existence will require, ensuring that the transformation serves educational rather than purely punitive purposes. Selendris's decision to accept temporary transformation rather than extended exile reflects her understanding of Kaldorei's spiritual values and her commitment to addressing the corruption that led to her original transgression. The weeks of preparation that follow her acceptance involve not only spiritual exercises designed to prepare her consciousness for animal existence, but intensive study of the natural systems she will experience from a radically different perspective. Druids who specialize in transformation magic work with her to understand the psychological and spiritual dimensions of shape-shifting, while naturalists explain the ecological relationships she will observe directly during her sentence. The ritual transformation that begins Selendris's sentence takes place during the new moon, when the barriers between different states of existence become most permeable and when change becomes most possible. The ceremony involves not only the druids who will perform the actual transformation, but representatives of the animal species she will become, ensuring that her temporary existence within their form serves the interests of the natural world rather than simply her own rehabilitation. The transformation itself is conducted with reverent attention to the spiritual significance of crossing boundaries between different modes of consciousness and existence. Selendris's experience during her transformation into a deer provides profound insights into the natural harmony that her crime had disrupted, allowing her to understand through direct experience the interconnections that Kaldorei philosophy describes in abstract terms. Her consciousness, while maintaining its essential identity, becomes integrated with instincts and perceptions that reveal the forest as a living system where every action affects countless other creatures. Her direct experience of vulnerability to predators, dependence on seasonal cycles, and integration within complex ecological relationships provides education about natural balance that no amount of theoretical instruction could achieve. The supervision that guides Selendris's transformation ensures that her animal existence serves genuine educational purposes rather than becoming merely exotic punishment. Druids capable of communicating with animals monitor her psychological adaptation to her altered state, providing guidance when her human consciousness struggles with instinctive responses and ensuring that she gains genuine understanding from her experience. Her progress is evaluated not only in terms of behavioral compliance, but in terms of spiritual growth that will support her eventual reintegration into Kaldore society as someone genuinely committed to natural harmony. The restoration work that Selendris performs during her time in animal form provides both restitution for her crime and practical experience of the regenerative processes that maintain forest health. Her deer form allows her to participate in seed dispersal, soil conditioning, and other natural processes that contribute to the sacred grove's recovery from her attack. This work provides direct experience of how individual actions contribute to broader patterns of growth and renewal, demonstrating through lived experience the principles that govern Kaldore relationships with the natural world. The conclusion of Selendris's transformation period provides resolution not only for her individual case, but for the broader questions about crime, punishment, and redemption that her transgression had raised within the community. Her successful integration of the insights gained through animal existence, demonstrated through psychological evaluation and spiritual assessment, shows that the corruption that led to her original crime has been genuinely cleansed. The formal recognition of her transformation by druidic authorities and community witnesses completes the process of restoration, returning her to Kaldore society with enhanced understanding of the natural harmony that defines their civilization. The aftermath of Selendris's successful rehabilitation demonstrates how individual cases of spiritual restoration contribute to the broader cultural frameworks that maintain Kaldore's social cohesion across the centuries. Her experience becomes part of the teaching tradition through which druidic orders transmit understanding about the relationship between crime, corruption, and healing, providing guidance for future cases involving spiritual contamination. Her restoration provides evidence that even serious transgressions against sacred space can be addressed through appropriate intervention, maintaining community confidence in the effectiveness of traditional justice while adapting to new threats posed by demonic corruption and magical warfare. The broader implications of Kaldore justice, as revealed through Selendris's case, extend beyond individual criminal prosecution to encompass fundamental questions about how immortal societies maintain moral order while adapting to changing conditions across centuries of existence. The emphasis on restoration over punishment, spiritual growth over legal compliance, and community healing over individual suffering reflects cultural adaptations to the realities of extremely long lifespans, where punitive approaches might create permanent divisions within small populations that must maintain unity across vast spans of time. Every transgression addressed, every corruption cleansed, every transformation completed demonstrates that Kaldore society has developed sophisticated methods for maintaining spiritual harmony while preserving the individual agency that distinguishes conscious beings from the natural forces they serve and protect. The Undercity spreads beneath the ruins of Lord Aeron like a cancer of purpose and memory, its twisted corridors echoing with the footsteps of those who have already paid death's ultimate price and found it insufficient to purchase peace. In the shadows of the royal quarter, where blight green torches cast sickly light on walls that remember the screams of plague victims, a forsaken alchemist named Morticia Blightweaver pours stolen life essence into forbidden experiments that violate the Dark Lady's edicts against unauthorized necromantic research. The moment the stolen souls writhe within her apparatus, she becomes more than a criminal within forsaken society. She becomes a reminder that even death cannot cure the fundamental selfishness that drives individuals to place personal ambition above the collective welfare of those who have found purpose in undeath. Justice among the Forsaken operates according to principles that would be incomprehensible to the living, shaped by the fundamental reality that traditional concepts of life, death, and suffering require complete reconceptualization when applied to beings who have experienced the ultimate punishment and emerged from it transformed rather than destroyed. The very notion of deterrence becomes complex when dealing with individuals who have already endured the worst that existence can inflict, while rehabilitation takes on entirely different meanings for consciousness that has been fundamentally altered by the experience of death and resurrection. Crime itself must be redefined within a society where the taking of life becomes a gift rather than a theft, where suffering serves as reminder of transformation rather than simple punishment, and where the ultimate goal is not preservation of individual existence, but advancement of collective purposes that justify the horror of undeath itself. Morticia's transgression against Forsaken law reflects the unique challenges that face a society built upon the systematic violation of natural order, where the boundaries between acceptable and forbidden necromancy must be maintained through careful regulation rather than absolute prohibition. Her theft of life essence from recently executed criminals violates regulations established not from squeamishness about death or suffering, but from practical recognition that unauthorized necromantic experimentation threatens the stability of undead society by creating unpredictable magical effects that could disrupt the careful balance between consciousness and decay that allows the Forsaken to function as coherent individuals rather than mindless undead. Her crime represents not moral failure in traditional terms, but violation of the technical standards that prevent undead society from collapsing into chaos. The detection of Morticia's illegal experimentation occurs through surveillance mechanisms that reflect the Forsaken understanding that their society's survival depends upon constant vigilance against both external threats and internal dissolution. Royal Apothecary Society monitors maintain constant observation of all necromantic research within the Undercity, using detection spells that can identify unauthorized manipulation of life force from considerable distances. Her experiments register on these monitoring systems as anomalous magical signatures that indicate either security breaches or violations of established protocols, triggering investigation procedures designed to distinguish between external attacks and internal transgression. The investigation that follows Morticia's identification as the source of unauthorized necromantic activity demonstrates the integration of magical detection and criminal justice that characterizes Forsaken law enforcement. Deathstalker agents, their undead nature allowing them to operate in environments that would be lethal to living investigators, examine the physical evidence of her experiments while specialized apothecaries analyze the magical residues to determine the exact nature of her violations. Their investigation reveals not only the technical details of her unauthorized research, but the broader network of black market suppliers who provided her with the stolen life essence necessary for her experiments. Forsaken approaches to criminal interrogation reflect their unique advantages in extracting information from suspects who cannot be threatened with death or dismemberment in conventional ways. Morticia's questioning takes place in chambers designed to exploit the psychological vulnerabilities specific to undead consciousness, using techniques that target the fragile balance between memory and decay that maintains Forsaken identity. Interrogators trained in manipulating undead psychology apply pressure through controlled acceleration of decomposition, temporary separation of consciousness from physical form, and most effectively, threats to the magical bonds that prevent her from dissolving into mindless undeath. The confession that emerges from Morticia's interrogation reveals motivations that illuminate the distinctive forms of ambition and desperation that drive criminal behavior within undead society. She explains that her unauthorized experiments were attempts to develop techniques for strengthening the connection between Forsaken consciousness and their decaying bodies, potentially extending the period of coherent existence before inevitable dissolution into mindlessness. Her research, while technically illegal, was motivated by the universal fear that haunts all Forsaken existence, the knowledge that their current state is temporary and that their consciousness will eventually succumb to the same decay that affects their physical forms. The legal framework that processes Morticia's case operates according to principles established by Sylvanas Windrunner during her tenure as Dark Lady, combining traditional concepts of justice with practical requirements for maintaining order among populations that exist outside conventional moral categories. Forsaken law recognizes that undead society must balance individual autonomy against collective survival, acknowledging that excessive restriction of necromantic research would eliminate the advantages that justify their existence, while recognizing that uncontrolled experimentation threatens the stability that allows their society to function. Her case becomes a test of how effectively these principles can address violations that blur the boundaries between individual advancement and community welfare. The judicial proceedings that determine Morticia's fate convene in the Hall of Dark Judgment, where the architecture serves to remind all participants of the fundamental realities that govern undead existence. The chamber has been carved from the bones of plague victims, its walls lined with skulls that serve both decorative and magical functions, channeling necromantic energy that enhances the court's ability to detect deception and evaluate the spiritual dimensions of criminal behavior. The space embodies the Forsaken acceptance of death as transformation rather than ending, creating an environment where justice can be administered according to principles that acknowledge the unique nature of undead consciousness. The tribunal that judges Morticia's case represents the primary institutions of Forsaken society, combining administrative efficiency with necromantic expertise to ensure that decisions serve both immediate needs and long-term survival of undead civilization. The presiding judge is a master apothecary whose authority derives from both technical expertise in necromantic arts and demonstrated loyalty to Forsaken collective interests. Additional members include a Death Stalker, whose intelligence work provides understanding of external threats that might be connected to unauthorized research, and a Dark Cleric whose spiritual authority helps evaluate the implications of necromantic violations for Forsaken society's relationship with the forces that sustain their existence. The presentation of evidence in Forsaken courts draws upon sources of information that reflect their society's integration of magical and mundane investigation techniques. Physical evidence includes the apparatus used in Morticia's experiments, analyzed both through conventional examination and necromantic divination that reveals the magical signatures of the stolen life essence she employed. Testimony from her suppliers provides information about the black market networks that facilitate unauthorized necromantic research, while magical examination of her laboratory reveals the specific techniques she employed and their potential implications for broader Forsaken security. The prosecution's case against Morticia emphasizes not the moral dimensions of her crime, but the practical threats that unauthorized necromantic research poses to Forsaken society's survival and stability. Legal advocates trained in Forsaken jurisprudence argue that her violations of established protocols threaten the careful balance of magical forces that allows the Undercity to function without dissolving into chaos, and that her theft of life essence from authorized sources undermines the resource management systems that support legitimate research programs. Their arguments focus on demonstrating that individual pursuit of necromantic advancement, however well-intentioned, cannot be permitted to compromise collective security. Morticia's defense before the Forsaken Tribunal reveals both her understanding of undead legal principles and her attempt to place her actions within a framework that serves broader Forsaken interests rather than purely personal ambition. She does not deny her violations of established protocols or attempt to minimize the technical seriousness of her unauthorized research. Instead, She argues that her experiments were motivated by legitimate concerns about the long-term viability of Forsaken consciousness, and that her discoveries could potentially benefit all undead by extending the period of coherent existence before inevitable dissolution. Her defense emphasizes the innovative value of her research, while acknowledging the procedural violations that brought her before the tribunal. The technical testimony provided by expert witnesses adds dimensions to Morticia's trial that distinguish Forsaken justice from legal systems that deal primarily with living defendants. Necromantic specialists describe the specific magical effects of her unauthorized experiments, explaining how her manipulation of stolen life essence created resonance patterns that could potentially destabilize the magical foundations that support Forsaken consciousness. This testimony is not used simply to establish her guilt, but to provide understanding of the appropriate responses that will address both her individual violations and the broader security concerns that her activities have raised. The investigation into the sources of Morticia's stolen life essence reveals connections between her individual crime and broader networks of illegal activity that threaten Forsaken society, demonstrating how criminal cases often expose systemic problems requiring coordinated responses. Deathstalker agents discover that her suppliers operate an extensive black market in necromantic materials that includes not only life essence theft, but trafficking in plague samples, unauthorized distribution of alchemical formulae, and potentially treasonous communication with external enemies. This discovery transforms her case from simple protocol violation into a broader security investigation that has implications for Forsaken intelligence operations. The deliberation process that follows the presentation of evidence demonstrates Forsaken commitment to rational analysis over emotional responses, reflecting their society's understanding that undead consciousness provides advantages in objective evaluation of complex problems. Tribunal members analyze not only the immediate facts of Morticia's case, but the broader patterns of unauthorized research that her activities represent, and the most effective responses for maintaining both security and scientific advancement. Their discussions draw upon precedents from previous cases, while considering the evolving nature of threats to Forsaken society and the need to adapt legal responses to changing circumstances. The verdict delivered by Morticia's tribunal reflects the sophisticated integration of punishment and utility that characterizes mature Forsaken jurisprudence. She is found guilty of unauthorized necromantic research and theft of controlled substances, findings that acknowledge the technical violations of established protocols while recognizing the potential value of her research discoveries. Her sentence combines immediate consequences that address the harm her violations have caused with longer-term arrangements that allow her expertise to serve Forsaken interests while ensuring that future research activities comply with established security requirements. The specific elements of Morticia's sentence demonstrate how Forsaken justice addresses criminal behavior through practical responses that serve collective interests rather than abstract concepts of moral punishment. She is stripped of her independent research privileges and assigned to supervised work within official Royal Apothecary Society programs, ensuring that her expertise remains available to serve Forsaken interests while preventing further unauthorized activities. Her research discoveries are confiscated and integrated into official programs designed to address the consciousness degradation problems that motivated her original violations. Most significantly, she undergoes magical binding that makes future violations of necromantic protocols physically painful, creating biological deterrent effects that supplement external supervision. The implementation of Morticia's sentence reveals the practical machinery through which Forsaken society converts individual transgression into collective benefit while maintaining security against both internal and external threats. Her assignment to supervised research positions allows her to continue contributing to necromantic advancement while ensuring that her activities serve official rather than personal objectives. The magical binding that prevents future violations demonstrates Forsaken willingness to employ necromantic techniques for law enforcement purposes, reflecting their understanding that undead consciousness can be modified through magical intervention in ways that would be impossible with living subjects. The broader implications of Morticia's case extend beyond individual criminal prosecution to encompass fundamental questions about how undead society balances innovation against security, individual ambition against collective welfare, and scientific advancement against practical stability. The tribunal's decision to integrate her research discoveries into official programs demonstrates Forsaken pragmatism in extracting value from criminal behavior while maintaining deterrent effects against future violations. Her sentence becomes a precedent for addressing similar cases where unauthorized research produces genuinely valuable results that could benefit Forsaken society, despite the procedural violations involved in their development. The aftermath of Morticia's successful integration into supervised research programs demonstrates how Forsaken justice serves not only punitive functions, but strategic objectives that advance undead civilizations' long-term survival and development. Her continued work on consciousness preservation techniques contributes to official programs designed to address the fundamental challenge that faces all Forsaken: the gradual degradation of self-awareness that threatens to transform coherent individuals into mindless undead. Her case becomes part of the legal tradition that guides Forsaken responses to necromantic violations, providing guidance for future cases while demonstrating the system's capacity to adapt to changing circumstances. The integration of Morticia's sentence with broader Forsaken security operations reveals how individual criminal cases serve intelligence functions that extend far beyond immediate punishment or rehabilitation. Information gathered during her prosecution contributes to ongoing investigations of black market networks, unauthorized research programs, and potential security threats that could compromise Forsaken society's survival. Her cooperation with these investigations, incentivized through reduced sentence terms and research privileges, demonstrates how criminal justice serves as one component of the comprehensive security apparatus that protects undead society from both internal dissolution and external threats. The unique challenges of maintaining order among undead populations become apparent through the extended implementation of Morticia's sentence, revealing problems that have no equivalent in societies composed of living beings. The magical binding that prevents her from violating necromantic protocols requires periodic renewal to maintain effectiveness, creating ongoing administrative burdens that must be balanced against security benefits. Her supervised research activities must be constantly monitored to ensure that innovation serves official objectives rather than personal ambition, requiring expertise and resources that strain Forsaken administrative capacity. These practical difficulties demonstrate why unauthorized research poses such serious threats to undead society's stability. The psychological effects of Morticia's sentence reveal the distinctive forms of rehabilitation that apply to undead consciousness, where traditional concepts of moral improvement must be adapted to beings whose fundamental nature has been altered by death and resurrection. Her integration into supervised research programs provides not only practical control over her activities, but opportunities for psychological reintegration into Forsaken society through productive contribution to collective objectives. The magical binding that prevents future violations serves not only deterrent functions, but therapeutic purposes by eliminating the internal conflicts between personal ambition and social compliance that contributed to her original transgression. The precedent established by Morticia's case influences the development of Forsaken legal doctrine in ways that extend beyond necromantic research to encompass broader questions about individual autonomy and collective responsibility within undead society. Her sentence demonstrates the tribunal's commitment to practical solutions that serve multiple objectives simultaneously, addressing immediate security concerns while preserving the innovative capacity that justifies Forsaken Society's continued existence. The legal principles applied to her case become part of the framework that guides responses to other forms of criminal behavior, establishing standards for balancing punishment against utility in ways that serve undead civilizations' long-term interests. The broader implications of Forsaken justice, as revealed through Morticia's case, extend beyond individual criminal prosecution to encompass fundamental questions about how societies that exist outside conventional moral categories maintain order while preserving the qualities that distinguish them from their origins. The emphasis on utility over punishment, practical security over abstract justice, and collective advancement over individual autonomy reflects cultural adaptations to the realities of existence that transcends traditional life and death. Every violation addressed, every sentence implemented, every precedent established demonstrates that Forsaken Society has developed sophisticated methods for maintaining cohesion while adapting to the unique challenges that face beings whose very existence violates the natural order that governs conventional civilization. The weight of choice reverberates across the worlds of Azeroth with the persistence of ancient echoes, carrying within each decision the accumulated wisdom and prejudice of civilizations that have defined themselves as much through their responses to transgression as through their achievements in war, magic, or exploration. From the ordered courts of Stormwind to the honor-bound tribunals of Orgrimmar, from the spiritual justice of Teldrassil to the pragmatic calculations of the Undercity, each society has developed approaches to crime and punishment that reflect not only practical needs for maintaining order, but fundamental beliefs about the nature of consciousness, responsibility, and the possibilities for redemption or transformation that distinguish civilization from chaos. The emergence of these diverse systems of justice reveals the profound influence that cultural memory exerts upon contemporary legal institutions as each civilization adapts universal human needs for order and security to the specific historical experiences that have shaped their collective identity. Stormwind's emphasis on procedural fairness and rehabilitation reflects the hard-learned lessons of a kingdom that has rebuilt itself multiple times from the ashes of war, invasion, and internal conflict. Recognizing that sustainable society requires institutions capable of integrating former enemies and addressing the social problems that contribute to criminal behavior. The systematic thoroughness of their legal proceedings, the careful attention to evidence and representation, and the commitment to proportional punishment all serve to demonstrate that human civilization has learned to distinguish between justice and vengeance. Orcish approaches to criminal behavior, by contrast, reveal how warrior cultures adapt concepts of honor and courage to the practical requirements of maintaining social order among populations whose survival depends upon military effectiveness and collective solidarity. The emphasis on personal responsibility, trial by combat, and redemption through demonstrated courage reflects cultural adaptations to the realities of life in hostile environments where individual failure can cascade into group destruction. Mak'gora and other traditional responses to honor violations serve not only to address immediate criminal behavior, but to reinforce the cultural values that enable Orcish society to function despite constant external threats and the psychological pressures of warrior existence. Night Elf justice, shaped by millennia of existence that spans cycles of growth and destruction invisible to shorter-lived races, approaches crime and punishment through frameworks that integrate individual behavior with cosmic principles governing the relationship between consciousness and nature. Their emphasis on spiritual restoration over punishment, transformation over incarceration, and harmony over control reflects cultural wisdom accumulated across lifespans that encompass entire civilizations among mortal races. The sophisticated integration of druidic magic with legal institutions demonstrates how immortal societies develop approaches to justice that must account for consequences extending across centuries rather than decades, requiring responses to criminal behavior that address long-term spiritual health rather than immediate social control. Forsaken approaches to crime reveal how societies that exist outside conventional categories of life and death must reconstruct fundamental concepts of justice to address the unique challenges faced by consciousness that has experienced the ultimate penalty and emerged transformed rather than destroyed. Their emphasis on utility over punishment, practical security over moral instruction, and collective advancement over individual rehabilitation reflects adaptations to existence that transcends traditional frameworks for understanding crime and consequence. The integration of necromantic technology with legal institutions creates possibilities for rehabilitation and deterrence that would be impossible within societies bound by conventional limitations of mortality and physical existence. These contrasting approaches to criminal justice illuminate fundamental differences in how various cultures understand the nature of individual consciousness and its relationship to collective welfare, revealing philosophical divisions that extend far beyond immediate questions of crime and punishment into broader territories of political organization, spiritual belief, and social identity. Stormwind's commitment to individual rights balanced against community needs reflects human cultural traditions that emphasize rational analysis and procedural fairness as methods for achieving justice that serves both practical and moral objectives. Their legal institutions demonstrate faith in the possibility that systematic application of consistent principles can produce outcomes that reflect truth rather than power, wisdom rather than prejudice, and justice rather than expedience. Orcish emphasis on honor and personal responsibility, manifested through institutions like Mak'gora that allow individuals to reclaim standing through demonstrated courage, reveals cultural values that prioritize character over circumstance and individual agency over systematic explanation. Their approaches to criminal behavior assume that moral choices reflect fundamental aspects of personal identity that can be changed through will and action, rather than external intervention, creating legal institutions that focus on providing opportunities for redemption rather than analyzing the social factors that contribute to criminal behavior. This philosophical orientation reflects broader Orcish cultural adaptations to the realities of warrior existence, where survival depends upon individual courage and collective solidarity rather than institutional protection or systematic social support. Night Elf integration of spiritual transformation with criminal justice reflects cultural understandings that individual behavior affects cosmic balances, extending far beyond immediate social relationships into territories of natural harmony, spiritual equilibrium, and magical stability. Their legal institutions operate according to principles that recognize crime as spiritual disease requiring healing rather than moral failure requiring punishment, creating responses to criminal behavior that address underlying spiritual imbalances rather than simply deterring future violations. This approach demonstrates cultural wisdom accumulated across lifespans that provide perspective on the long-term consequences of different approaches to justice, allowing for sophisticated evaluation of which responses actually produce the behavioral changes they claim to achieve. Forsaken approaches to criminal justice, necessitated by their unique existence outside conventional categories of life and death, reveal how societies can reconstruct fundamental legal concepts when traditional frameworks prove inadequate to address new forms of consciousness and community. Their emphasis on practical utility over moral instruction, magical modification over environmental change, and collective advancement over individual dignity, demonstrates how radically different approaches to justice can emerge when underlying assumptions about the nature of consciousness and community undergo fundamental transformation. Their legal institutions provide evidence that criminal justice serves functions beyond moral education or social control, potentially offering tools for consciousness modification that could revolutionize approaches to behavioral change. The comparative analysis of these different systems reveals both the possibilities and limitations inherent in various approaches to criminal justice, demonstrating how cultural values and practical constraints interact to create legal institutions that serve multiple functions simultaneously. Stormwind's procedural emphasis on evidence and representation produces outcomes that appear fair and rational, but requires significant administrative resources and may prove inadequate for addressing the underlying social problems that contribute to criminal behavior. Orcish emphasis on honor and personal agency creates strong incentives for individual responsibility and community solidarity, but may prove harsh for individuals whose criminal behavior results from circumstances beyond their immediate control. Night Elf integration of spiritual healing with legal punishment addresses the underlying psychological and spiritual factors that contribute to criminal behavior, but requires magical resources and cultural consensus that may not be available to societies with different spiritual traditions or shorter lifespans. Forsaken approaches to consciousness modification offer potentially revolutionary tools for eliminating criminal behavior through direct intervention, but raise fundamental questions about individual autonomy and the relationship between personal identity and social compliance that extend far beyond immediate concerns about crime and punishment. The effectiveness of these different approaches cannot be evaluated simply through statistical measures of recidivism or crime rates, but must be assessed according to broader criteria that include their contributions to social cohesion, individual dignity, cultural continuity, and the preservation of values that define each society's identity. Stormwind's legal institutions serve not only to process criminal cases efficiently, but to demonstrate the kingdom's commitment to rational governance and equal treatment under law that distinguishes human civilization from the arbitrary rule of tyrants or the chaotic violence of barbarism. Their approach to justice reinforces cultural values that extend beyond crime and punishment into territories of political participation, economic development, and social integration. Orcish legal traditions serve multiple functions beyond immediate crime control, reinforcing cultural emphasis on courage, honor, and personal responsibility that enables Orcish society to maintain cohesion despite constant external threats and internal pressures. Their approaches to criminal justice create opportunities for individuals to demonstrate character transformation while strengthening community bonds through shared participation in traditional ceremonies that connect contemporary decisions to ancestral wisdom. The integration of trial by combat with legal proceedings serves not only to resolve disputes, but to maintain cultural connections to warrior traditions that define Orcish identity across generations. Night Elf approaches to criminal justice serve to maintain the spiritual equilibrium that enables their society to function across lifespans that encompass multiple cycles of growth and renewal, addressing not only immediate behavioral problems, but the long-term spiritual health that determines whether individuals can maintain harmonious relationships with natural forces across centuries of existence. Their legal institutions demonstrate cultural wisdom about the relationship between individual consciousness and cosmic harmony that has been accumulated across millennia of direct experience with the consequences of different approaches to spiritual development and community organization. Forsaken legal institutions serve the unique requirement of maintaining order among populations that exist outside conventional moral categories, creating frameworks for collective decision-making that address the practical challenges of undead existence while preserving the advantages that justify their continued existence. Their approaches to criminal justice demonstrate pragmatic adaptations to circumstances that have no precedent in living society, providing evidence that legal institutions can be reconstructed to serve radically different forms of consciousness and community organization. The implications of these different approaches extend beyond immediate questions of criminal justice into broader territories of governance, social organization, and cultural development that affect every aspect of how different societies understand themselves and their relationships with other civilizations. The procedural emphasis that characterizes human legal institutions creates foundations for political systems that emphasize rational deliberation and systematic evaluation of competing claims, supporting approaches to governance that depend upon informed citizen participation rather than traditional authority or military dominance. Orsish emphasis on honor and personal responsibility creates cultural foundations that support military effectiveness and social solidarity, but may prove less adaptable to circumstances that require systematic analysis of complex social problems or integration of diverse populations with different cultural backgrounds. Night Elf integration of spiritual wisdom with legal institutions creates possibilities for governance that addresses long-term consequences rather than immediate political pressures, supporting approaches to social organization that prioritize sustainability and harmony over short-term advantage or rapid change. Forsaken adaptations to undead existence demonstrate that legal and political institutions can be reconstructed to serve radically different forms of consciousness and community, potentially offering insights about governance that could prove relevant as other societies face fundamental transformations in the nature of consciousness, community, and individual identity. The diversity of these approaches to criminal justice reflects broader patterns of cultural adaptation and innovation that characterize Azeroth's civilizations, demonstrating how different societies develop distinctive solutions to universal human challenges while maintaining the cultural identity that defines their place within the broader community of conscious beings. Each system of justice serves not only to address immediate problems of crime and social order, but to reinforce the cultural values and institutional structures that enable different societies to maintain cohesion across time, space, and the various transformations that result from war, magical influence, and contact with other civilizations. The ongoing evolution of these legal systems, as evidenced by their adaptation to new forms of crime and changing social circumstances, demonstrates that approaches to criminal justice serve as indicators of broader cultural health and adaptive capacity. Societies that maintain effective legal institutions while adapting to changing circumstances demonstrate resilience that extends beyond immediate crime control into broader territories of governance, economic development, and cultural continuity. Those that fail to adapt their approaches to justice to changing circumstances risk not only increased criminal activity, but broader social dissolution that can cascade into political instability, economic disruption, and cultural fragmentation. The weight of choice that governs individual decisions about crime and compliance extends beyond immediate personal consequences into broader questions about the kind of society that each decision helps to create or destroy. Every theft deterred or punished, every act of violence addressed through legal institutions rather than private vengeance, every successful rehabilitation that transforms criminal behavior into productive citizenship demonstrates that conscious beings possess the capacity to create social order through rational institutions rather than arbitrary force. In the grim darkness of worlds constantly threatened by chaos, the systematic application of just laws represents one of consciousness's most important achievements, in the ongoing struggle to create meaning and purpose from the raw possibilities that existence provides.